Someone asks, what is the difference between fundamental planetary centers and greater planetary centers? And someone else is asking for the topic of the vigil to be expanded so that this work of vigil may be reinforced at this time in Figueira. We'll combine these two topics so that they become very current and adequate for us, also because they are very correlated. What we call fundamental planetary centers are those three basic centers that they help anchor on the planet the energy of the planetary logos, the energy of the pure planetary consciousness. These fundamental planetary centers, which we know under the name of Ibera, Shambhala, and Misitlan, they gradually take turns in their activity. These three planetary centers, Ibera, Shambhala, and Misitlan, they anchor the will, the plan for the planet. And this is transmitted to them by the general consciousness of the planet, the planetary logos. And these centers take turns in this focalization, so to say, throughout the human races. As the races are 7, and we are at the 5th, we are already at this moment with the 3rd active center, which is Misitlan, because Ibera was this focalizer, fundamental focalizer in the first races, which were not physical, and they were preparing to be physical. Then Shambhala was focalized after from the 3rd race, which started being physical, and now Misitlan enters in this focalization, beginning with the 5th race, this current race. So while a center like this, like these ones, is totally active, focalizing this consciousness of the planet, the other two, they are either in vigil, that is, preparing for a coming cycle, or they are already semi-active, supporting the fundamental center under some aspects. So at this moment, Misitlan is the fundamental center that is active. Shambhala is in vigil, that is, Shambhala is withdrawn, lucid, to prepare future cycles in which it'll participate and synthesizing its entire experience. And Ibera, which is in an intermediate position, is preparing to be the next fundamental center in a time that we have no idea about. Therefore, at this moment, Misitlan represents this will, this plan, this consciousness, this planetary consciousness. Now, greater planetary centers is something else. Greater planetary centers is one of these three, in this case, Misitlan today, forming triangles of action with other planetary centers that are not fundamental. So at this moment, the greater centers are Misitlan, which is a fundamental center, Aurora, and Urx. which are the two greater centers among the other planetary centers, of which we know Lisfatma, Mirnajat, Anutea, as you know. And these three greater centers, they are called greater because they synthesize the very same aspect, divine aspects, that the three fundamental centers synthesize in the cosmic sense. And these three greater centers synthesize the same three aspects in the divine sense. It is cosmic, but it is another level. These three greater centers, of which Myslitan is a part and is a fundamental center, they emit to the three other planetary centers and to all planetary life the purpose of the divine plan for Earth, for humanity. In other words, it emits this knowledge, this intelligence, this love, wisdom, this power, this divine power to the other planetary centers and to humanity in general and to Earth in general. And the other planetary centers, besides these three greater centers, take charge of transmitting to humanity and to the planet the evolutionary impulse duly resized and prepared so that all the sectors of the planet or those who serve the world may receive this impulse. We are talking about monads, aren't we? These monads will gradually receive these impulses and then they gradually fulfill and develop this purpose. So, from our point of view, these centers work in this way and help in this way. And our connection of ours as humanity with the reality of the planet, every connection is based on our contact with these centers, or it is based on what these centers transmit to us hierarchically through instructors, guides that we may have on the inner planes or that transmit directly to our monads on to our deeper nuclei. The work of these centers, in order for them to transmit this purpose to us, and so that this purpose, this consciousness of the evolutionary plan may reach us, that is, so that our monads, our souls, our bodies may have conditions to respond to these impulses, so that they may have conditions to perceive this will, to feel this love, or to absorb this intelligence. For this, a lot of work is necessary, and this work is what the hierarchies of these centers do, carry out, in order for us to enrich our work of vigil, this work of permanent vigil. Let's try to find a point of view that may connect us with these planetary centers during the permanent vigil. So one of the works of these planetary centers or these hierarchies is to remain affirming as a consciousness the evolutionary purpose. And this because, as we know, there are real cosmic battles between evolutionary forces and the other forces. So here, these centers or these hierarchies, they try with their vigil, with their focalization, with their consciousness entirely awakened, entirely lucid, they try to focalize this purpose, channel these evolutionary forces so that everything may go in the evolutionary direction, because this planet is saturated by the contrary forces, the involutionary forces, not only of its own involutionary forces, but involutionary forces expelled from other areas of the cosmos are also channeled to it. So these centers work a lot because this battle and this fight is very intense at this very moment of the planet. So these planetary centers and these hierarchies build with their consciousness. They continuously build these affirmations. And when the hierarchy makes an affirmation, this starts existing. So when a hierarchy affirms that the higher will, that the central celestial government or the planetary logos will be, that will be. But until it is, the fight is intense. And the aspiration, the consciousness of these great brothers and sisters, this aspiration, in a certain way, is transmitted to us. And if we stay permeable to the very same aspiration that they have, if we stay receptive to this affirmation that they make, and this for the humanity of the surface is very complicated because the humanity of the surface is basically split at this point in the monads. So here, this is a work that is really not only fundamental, but it is also a higher work that may reflect upon the way we live, our way of being here. Without this work of the hierarchy, it would be impossible to contain or refrain or limit certain events that might destroy, that would destroy the evolutionary work on Earth, because those contrary forces are very strong. And it's good that we may know this so that we do not play with this, so that we do not take this lightly as we are talking about fundamental planetary centers and greater planetary centers. So here, this is being said not to give information, but this is being said so that we may recognize our place in this and recognize what instruments we have to help this. What do we have? What is the instruments? What are the instruments that we have in this planetary spiritual center to collaborate with this? That is, to make a connection with this hierarchy or to make a connection with these planetary centers. We have said once that Vigil was the central point of the work here and service here. This was not clearly explained because we were talking about Vigil from the point of view of those who would do the Vigil. But Vigil here was not created for us because we can do our Vigil by ourselves anywhere, and we do not need the vigil here for this. Vigil was instituted here so that it might have a synthesis, a strong and powerful synthesis of our intentions, evolutionary intentions, and our affirmations along the evolutionary path, so that here there might be a watchful nucleus, so that here there might be a nucleus in Vigil. No, we are in Vigil individually, but here a watchful nucleus is formed by our intention, our fiery aspiration to collaborate with these brothers and sisters, to be as stewardess here, where the involutionary forces are loose and dominate. Christ called these forces the princes of this world, and those who are most directly related to these forces are we who are incarnated monads. We, as incarnated monads, we are here in the kingdom of these involutionary forces. So here our role is fundamental. We could not deal with these forces directly. These forces are much stronger than humanity. Taken all together, and those who have perceived them, they know that what they are in part. So we will not directly deal with these forces, but we'll place ourselves in conditions, we'll place ourselves in an alignment and in a state of being awakened and of attention, so that the energy of these hierarchies, so that the energy of these planetary centers may be channeled even in practical life. And this depends on the incarnated monads, because this control, this care, this vigilance, which is the normal state of this hierarchy, to maintain this balance so that the planet may not disintegrate before the time. This is the continuous work of the hierarchy and of these centers. And the work of these incarnated monads is to attune with this very same state, the very same state of attention. So when we are at the service, we are during the service of Vigil, we are connected with this. We are not presenting Vigil as any challenge to this, because this is not our role. Our role is to attune, is to align, is to harmonize ourselves with the state of Vigil, because it is only through the state of Vigil, it is only in this state of perfect calm, and in this state in which we are in no sense asleep or inert or tired. It is at this moment that we are totally awakened, ready, that we are in that positive tension, in that tension that we can receive anything that may come from above, anything that may come from above. But this anything, in principle, is the energy of this hierarchy. It is the forces of this hierarchy that are preparing us to be hierarchies in a future cycle. But in order for humanity to be a hierarchy in a future cycle, it needs at this moment to be learning to be a hierarchy. And today, we learn to be hierarchy the moment the hierarchy gradually sends us the tests of contact with these forces, and gradually sends us the resources for us to gradually deal with these forces, at first in ourselves, and then in the environment, and then a little beyond. But this, we should not worry about it. We should only know that our path is this, that no one is here to be unconscious of this fight, this great cosmic fight. No one is here to ignore this fight. We are here to, as a certain moment of our evolution approaches, become aware of this fight and know that we should not play with this. So what is evolutionary is evolutionary. What for our consciousness has ceased to be evolutionary, we have to take action. Otherwise, we stay with a an open door so that these involutionary forces may begin to act. And here the hierarchy cannot interfere beyond a certain point because we have free will. So here we have to know what it is all about. We have to know on what planet we are and what the hierarchy does, among other things, and that our next cycles will be within this work. Of course, the earth will be a lot more free from all this when we become a hierarchy, because until then, a lot of work will have been done. But at this moment, while this work is in progress, we should not just be looking at this. We should know that we have a role to play in this, and our part seems to be not to yield. Here, it's very necessary to have clarity about this and have this great opportunity, which is an environment to do vigil in a way that is dignified and noble, and not to play with this, and not to have this as one more spiritual exercise as so many others, spiritual exercise of alignment, of meditation, of concentration. All this is true. We know all these aspects of vigil already. But at this point, when this topic returns, then it's good that we deepen into this topic, because to reinvigorate the work of vigil here, as this person asks, we cannot reinvigorate this if we are not aware of what we are doing. So we can see that at this point, it's not enough that we may be doing vigil only for our individual process of alignment with the higher self, the overself, and here it's not enough. Here we need to have more knowledge about what's happening, more knowledge about the meaning of the vigil here, the meaning of this work here. So this work here is a miniature, a preparation for us as vehicles, as souls, and as monads. It is a preparation for us to someday be assuming or taking on this work on another stage or phase of the earth, of the planet, in which the divine energies will be much more implemented on humanity, and the general situation will be different. And this situation is already present in our consciousnesses. So, as the planetary situation is currently reaching its most critical point, because to some it has already um, become most critical. Some others, they cannot see it coming, but those who can see clearly, they know that we have reached the point. So this reflects on the behavior, on the daily behavior of people, in the mood, in the energy of souls, reflects on the harmony of the subtle planes. The subtle planes, by subtle planes, we understand the etheric, the astral, and the mental. And this reflects also as service and as intensity of work on the levels beyond the mental, where the spiritual, the monad, we are being greatly impelled, stimulated by the hierarchy to prepare ourselves for these transitions, and to prepare ourselves to take the place of this hierarchy in a future cycle, because the hierarchy that is here has greater works beyond this earth. And these incarnated monads will be part of the future planetary hierarchy. So this work of vigil here is not a work of 10 minutes in which the person stays in vigil for 10 minutes or a night of vigil. This is an individual work. the idea at this center is that there may be a permanent vigil, is that there may be a permanent state of attention, a permanent state of positive tension, of alignment with what is above. And we can only have this nucleus, this positive nucleus. We can only have this nucleus well awakened. Well awakened is the opposite of inertia, the opposite of tiredness, the opposite of sleep, the opposite of this lack of interest, of indifference. It's the opposite of all this. It's a state of being awakened, a state of vigil, a state of being ready and available for everything unconditionally, not humanly, as each one of us is, each one with their limitations, regardless of each one of us not being permanently in this state. We have to have a nucleus that may represent this state. So I cannot be in this state of awaken, unconditionally available for everything all the time. But I can, as a group, maintain this state because when I am attuned, I am building this state or I am maintaining this state. So one thing is our individual work with the vigil, in our relationship with the energy of vigil, that is the energy of attention, of being awakened, of being attentive, of being ready. This is a work of each one. This is an individual work. Something completely different is the nucleus of permanent vigil. Something completely different is this permanent vigil established, implemented, because throughout all these years of permanent vigil, there have been those who have built this state, and this state is there. It is on the subtle planes. This state is on the subtle levels of the center. This state is concentrated on the subtle levels because conscious beings internally have built and maintained this up to now. It's left to us to know if we will join this group that builds and watches and maintains this vigilance, or if we'll carry out this more superficially. Given the progression of the planetary situation, which is now affecting the minds and subtle bodies of many people who were not affected, here we'll see things that some will become amazed because as they are unexperienced, they will become amazed. They will see people who are not affected and they will become affected and act as everyone does. But we have to know that this is the current time. These are the current times. So we have to have the nucleus of vigil. We have to have the energy of vigil here more alive than ever, because at this moment, that's when it'll start acting from this point of view. That is, as a nucleus, as a center of living energy, awakened and available energy at the service given to the hierarchy. This must be maintained in a special way. So at this moment, this is affirmed, and it would be good if each being dedicated to this service of vigil, it would be good if those beings could present themselves and see with the board of vigil how they could be distributed into the 12 sessions. They should be aptly distributed so that every time there might be a true vigilant, or that we might, or that we couldn't have stayed for a long time with people who are under therapy, so to say, during Vigil. But now we have to have a greater understanding because now is when everything is entering a critical point. It would be good if we could go to Vigil and really incarnated this vigilant group nucleus because we need vigilance now. That is, we need hierarchical vigilance in miniature, in this reduced scale, but really active. And those who are more to the individual vigil and to those who are undergoing therapy and those who are going there because the consciousness tells them to go there, um, 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 we need those who really are incarnating or offering to incarnate this intention, this aspiration, and this will that the hierarchy uses to lead the process of transition of the earth without greater disasters, karmic disasters for the planet and humanity. So Vigil is a great, very broad service. It's a lot more than just being harmonizing the environment. The birds do, the rabbits that are there do it, the wolves do it, the flowers do it, the eucalyptuses do it, the lizards do it, the snakes do it. Everything like this, all these beings harmonize the environment. Our lower brothers and sisters participate in this vigil. But we have to do a little more than that. We have to be there really as people who offer to be vigilant, because being a vigilant is not a game. Being a vigilant is not just doing their shift at the door of a place, not to allow any thief to enter. To be a vigilant is to become known to those other forces. The moment they become known to those other forces, you have to be a lot more vigilant in order not to be attacked. And we have to know this so that at last we may understand what we are doing here in the sector of Vigil. This here is as real, is so real that one of the greatest vigilants on the planet, which is Moria or Ama, whatever name you give them, one of the greatest vigilants of this planet, once speaking about these forces said, I have always been careful, so much so that I was assassinated few times throughout my incarnations. This says it all, because it's enough for you to be a vigilant that you enter the list of those. And Moria said, I was assassinated just a few times. So here you can see the degree of offering that is being made to this group. The value of having uh, a permanent vigil being installed, implemented, so that we may have at this planetary center, spiritual center, the spiritual vigilance, which is a different kind of vigilance, because there is this vigilance of defense, indeed, the vigilant vigil of the guardians as our greater elder brothers, the guardians of the planet. So this is a kind of vigilance. And if this vigilance is continuous, if this vigilance is steady, if this nucleus remains at service really, then the spiritual vigilance starts. That is, the energy of this nucleus begins to work in the sense that the intellectual part of beings no longer becomes stagnant because these forces work on the basic planes, on the physical plane, the etheric and emotional and mental plane, but there is a kind of force of these that even numbs the intellectual part of people. So an individual with the intellect that is made numb, it does things out of law for him, for them, justifying to themselves why they are doing this. This is stagnance or the beginning of inertia in their mental planes. And this is where spiritual vigilance enters. There are certain members of the hierarchy, such as Antoine, who are in the spiritual vigilance, who are dealing with this part of the intellect, the part of the intellect that is understanding and awareness and that can understand that which is here to be understood, which is necessary that we may understand so that we do not comply with the game of the other forces. So this spiritual vigilance is a step that this nucleus has to take here. The step to be taken should not be our being called not to forget, to be punctual, these childish things of fulfilling the schedules, these shouldn't even exist at this point. The real step is not to manage to do this correctly because this should be being done by a few because otherwise it wouldn't exist. The step that should be taken is to go beyond this vigil of defense or beyond this vigil of guardians. The step to be taken is that that energy should be vitalizing the intellect of the individuals, that this vigil may be expanding, stimulating the spiritual understanding of these incarnated monads, in other words, of these vehicles, because the monads have to exist on the cosmic plane of these vehicles that need inspiration, they need to be strengthened and they need intellectual vitality in the understanding. Because if they understand what they are doing, if they understand where they are, if they understand what the work is, if they understand why we are here, then this vigil changes its point because there are very good people with the intellect that is stagnant on this planet. Because, in other words, you have the ability to understand and perceive spiritually, but you cannot do because your intellect is numb. The energy of vigil has to do this now. It has to give this. That's what the energy of vigil has to work at or work on, because in that if that is done, each one that approaches this activity of vigil, each one that telepathically makes contact with this vigilant nucleus that exists on this center, at this center, any contact that is made with this, there is a spiritual stimulation, and this is very important at this planetary moment for the alignment of bodies, for the alignment of the mental plane with higher nuclei and the mental, so that the mental may not stay at the normal mental. How many beings become lost because their mental bodies remain working or functioning on the normal level? How many souls are divided by all these paths of these forces? Here, clarity is needed, intellectual clarity is needed on the level of the spirit, so that these things may be perceived indeed in one's own consciousness, and then you follow this. You take the step out of the other kennel. You have to have both feet on the same kennel. These are being with their feet on both kennels is the situation of current humanity. But the vigil is done to take these consciousnesses from this situation. So, a spiritual center like this, in its sector of vigil, has this work of watching, of defending, of guarding, protecting. But what about the other work? Those who are sitting there to do a vigil or connecting telepathically with this work, those who are working, who are thinking of vigil, do they feel the stimulus? Do they leave this torpor of this normal intellect? This normal intellect works based on material things. So you see, this is the step that the sector vigil should take, which the energy of vigil should take. This is the step. This is what is here to be done at this moment. In other words, our not just being fulfilling schedules. This is not dignified and does not correspond to the moment we are going through. This is not does not correspond to the task of the center. So here we need to review this topic as we are doing in terms that have never been done before, because we had seen our side in the vigil, but now we are seeing the side of the higher need and this side of why this service exists here, why this work exists here in the face of a fight, of a situation that on these planes is still not completely solved. So here we really need revitalization, but this is nothing material. This is an understanding and our resizing and repositioning ourselves, because someone may be becoming unmotivated because they are not positioned and because they haven't updated their position, because it takes because they take too long in the primary, in the childish position, but they have to position themselves in a different way to feel revitalized, because our energy, our stimulus, or our consciousness, our capacity to be and serve, this is continuously renewed, but we have to recycle our position. We have to see what our position is at this point. If we are going there to do a service of ourselves, then we become unmotivated, because that's not why it exists. The planetary situation has evolved. Yes, therefore, our position before things should evolve. We are no longer here to deal with us. We are not here to take care of ourselves. Those who want to take care of themselves will feel unmotivated, because this is not the current situation. Because if someone is striving to do something, they they get a response from above. They have an extra help from above. And this extra response from above, brought about by their effort, by their goodwill, this thing from above introduced itself on the earthly life. So this is a way of serving when you strive to do vigil, because this has a response. If you're not striving, this never descends. This capacity, this possibility to maintain this balance between these forces, the evolutionary forces and the others, this capacity to be there as a guardian or as a balancer, so to say, or someone who dissolves or transmutes This is what must be developed, and this is what it happens in the work of Vigil. This is what happens as a learning experience for us and in the work of Vigil. This is what we are learning to do. And many are greatly helped in that. Many are greatly helped to reach this state. Today, it seemed to me that we needed to have the ideas very clear about this, because otherwise we would continue to be there in Vigil to do their own connection work, which is very important, but this, in the current situation of the planet, is not enough. And if we do not take this step of forgetting oneself for a few moments, if we do not take this step of remaining forgetful of oneself there during the vigil, then we do not climb this step and do not cross this door. And then the hierarchy continues to work up there on their own plane with fewer channels here, with fewer workers here. You have to have an intention and a purpose. While you have this purpose and intention to serve, offer this to the hierarchy. Offer this to the hierarchy in general. And all the offerings are accepted. All the offerings are accepted because there is the need for true service on all levels, from the physical level. On all levels, there is the need for this. But here, as there is a materialized, manifested spiritual center, one of the tasks of the center is to place this energy of vigil active in the etheric plane. You know what is etheric? It's quasi-physical. And one of the tasks of the center is to place vigil in the etheric plane here. And this is simple because you can be in any task, but etherically you are working on this, serving on this, and eventually on more inner planes also. So here, this intention, that's very steady intention, is necessary after we have received a more specific and updated information. In general, when we listen to such a thing, it's because it's time to do this. Otherwise, we wouldn't be listening to this. No one would say this, or we wouldn't hear it. But those who are listening, it's because it's time to do it. So later on, do not lament if you feel devitalized. Do not lament if you feel lost. Do not lament, because that is here. Because when you become aware, it's because it's time to do it. Unless we have not become aware or have not heard, that's something else.